Okay, I know it's evening, all our energies are wearing out. I'm sure this session is going to inspire you and give you some of the energy back. So if you can just, all of you take your seats. You know, I'm just going to do a 1-minute introductory talk on the panel and the amazing moderator here. But just to tell you how this panel came by, you know, we really wanted to have CEO conversations because CEO is the one who really sets the tone at the top, and that's the tone that actually comes into the organization. So great CEOs make great organizations, and we said we really need to have a CEO session, a panel with the CEOs. And when Rupa asked me, you know, can you put together some names of the CEOs? You know, I've been to so many of these events, women's events, and you always see women CEOs on the panel talking, and this is a subconscious mind, right? You think there are so many women CEOs out there. And when she asked me to put down the list and said, you know, why don't you, and I know quite a lot of CEOs, at least in Europe, I have to say I put 15 downs on the name, and there was one woman CEO that I knew personally. She's fortunately accepted the invitation and is on the panel, but I have to say I was literally shocked. And then, you know, typically this is what happens. You don't women CEOs, you start looking for women CEOs, and you fill the panel with women CEOs. And fortunately, we had an amazing moderator who also said, you know, that shouldn't be the case. We should also have men in the conversation. Otherwise, what happens is we include one gender and we exclude the other. We shouldn't do that. This is a conversation that needs to happen with both men and women CEOs. And that's the conversation you're going to have here. And I'm going to invite the wonderful Kasia Dembeck, who is one of the most amazing moderators I know. And she's going to now host the panel. Kasia.
My God, no pressure, huh? Thank you very much. I'm not sure. I don't remember if it was my idea, if it was common idea of all our speakers today that we really, if we are talking about diversity and inclusion, we should include everyone. And we've discussed here today we talked a lot about cooperation that is very much needed if you want any results. So I'm very happy with the guests I have here today. I would like to ask Edeltraud Leibrock from Global Managing Director Roland Berger to join us on stage. Hello. Henrik Andersen, our most wanted gentleman on the panel, Group President and CEO of Vestas. Henriette Holberg-Tigesen, CEO and President of Therma. And last but not least, Kasia Kieli. Kasia Kieli, CEO of TVN and Warner Bros. Discovery. I'm not sure whose notes these are. They're not yours, Kasia. Can we just toss them? Okay. No notes. Okay, I'm the only one with notes. I'll maybe move. I wanted to move my chair to see you guys. Like this. Thank you. Sorry for the disruption. There was a really strong statement today at the very beginning of the event, but I don't think it was kind of repeated enough, that we are in a situation when diversity and inclusion policies are actually regressing instead of progressing. And there are more and more bold statements from different CEOs, very important CEOs of very big companies, saying that, blaming diversity and inclusion policies for mishaps, for failures, and, laying them off outwardly. This is a really dangerous trend, or is it a trend? I'm not sure. But I wanted to ask you guys, I have this question for all of you, all panelists. Is it can you really blame diversity and inclusion policies for any failures? And if not, like from your perspective, why is it important to have those policies? Why is it important to promote that? You want to start, Kasia?
I can start. I'm on the first one. I think that, first and foremost, it's always, if you don't know what happens, let's assign the blame. So that's a number one thing, okay? and you always
gracious scapegoat. Yeah.
And you look to assign the blame. I think that any policy, if it's wrongly written or wrongly executed, will not work. Let's put it this way, okay? It doesn't matter what it is. Is it diversity? Is it anything? You know, travel policy? What have you? Yeah, what have you? And I think that, you know, in terms of diversity and inclusion, it starts definitely with leadership, but it has to end with culture. So if we don't transform the culture, it's gonna be a policy. And then let's assign the blame.
Yes, and then we can erase it just from one day to the other. Henrik, what's your take on this?
Oh, big question. I don't think there is one answer. I think there's several ways, and I think when you have that, and I was in a panel earlier in the afternoon, and don't get me wrong here, I think we moved into a culture where it's instant. And everything we do is instant, on the phone, on the information, on the change we are doing. And sometimes we forget that some of the things we are touching, and I spoke about the energy transition because we are investors in renewable, and I said it's going to last 3 or 4 decades. And I fully appreciate when I walk into a group, somebody will say, "Oh crap, Henrik, can't wait on that one." But it's just physical law, and we are touching things here. And I'm not comparing the diversity agenda with the energy transition. But it's probably as difficult to get done because we are touching areas across the world, and we have been around now, we are in 86 countries. We realize that there is an enormous upside in talking to diversity, but diversity is what we talk about here. Clearly now it's almost, somebody a few days ago said it's now down to only female and male. I think it's maybe a bit, at least for us, it's a lot more, because it's time zones, it's different cultures, it's different religions, it's different. And if you don't try to build that into your team thinking, then you're missing something. So, but as you were rightly saying, give me a policy and enforce it, but that's not the right, that won't give you the result, right? So you cannot force nature to do something if the nature doesn't want it. And then we are into something else. And the good thing is I have my boss 7 days a year here and sitting to the left of me. So I'm really keen because she's female, she sits on my board, she's CEO, she's younger than me. She has all reasons to actually one day say, if that guy is actually not following this one, but think he's deviating from a policy, sack me. No, but come on, can't have the highest person in an organization not wanted to do diversity from just real. Then you can do all your policy shit. That doesn't help it.
So we got ourselves a feminist on the panel. Okay. Positive bias, we'll call it. Edeltraud, we talked before the panel, and of course, there's plenty of data about diversity and inclusion being good for business, right? That businesses are more creative, that diverse business are more inventive, that there's a lot of good about diversity. But those quotes, those numbers are usually quoted at events like this for women, and we're preaching to those who already believe that, right? From your perspective, how do we convince the ones who are not convinced yet? And yeah, why do we need it?
Yeah, I think by now it's a proven fact that diverse boards, diverse leadership lead to better results. They create value for companies, they create more resilience, more effectiveness, more innovation. I think which is pretty clear, because if you just have people thinking alike, thinking and acting alike in the leadership team, on the board, then you have a cluster risk, a systemic risk that can be only mitigated by having a diverse team. And as you said before, it's not just about gender diversity, it's about diverse backgrounds, diverse generations, also diverse experiences, diverse views. And yeah, there are many studies. Maybe they are quoted in the wrong places. I want to quote Harvard Business Review, which is hopefully beyond doubt. So diverse led companies are 40%, 30%, 45%, according to Harvard Business Review, more likely to outperform their respective markets, and 70% more likely to capture new markets. So that are really strong numbers. And having that in mind, how important diverse leadership is for the success of a company, for value creation, turning that back would actually be the betrayal of our stakeholders. So I think it's not that easy, just by some companies who failed, maybe not because of the policies, but because of their leadership not being inclusive enough. I don't want to judge that, but just because of some had maybe not so good experiences, the capital market and the stakeholders will, I think, not have a rollback and not allow a rollback on a proven concept that makes companies more successful.
Henriette, are you at all worried about the change in the way we talk about diversity and inclusion? How would you convince the ones who want to get away from it not to do it?
Well, I am worried about what we are seeing happening, where you see a kind of a back retraction to what else we have, to the progress we have made. And I think it's also clear that in some companies and a number of places, it may be more that diversity is a thing that is done to you because it's said so, and the moment focus turns away, then the numbers come down. And we had the discussion before the panel, and we wanted a male CEO on, and for me, it's because diversity is not a female element. It is something that is equal for all of us and all CEOs, access to talent. There are plenty of reasons why we need the diversity. And I do think to get to that talent base, to have the best competitive position, it is a matter for any CEO. But I also think we need to have conversations equally among men and women around it. And it's one of the things where I would say earlier I used to think that it was not my problem how the men thought about it, in the sense that they used to have 100% of the quota. Now they're just up for fair competition. But I do think we need to make sure everyone is getting along on this journey, because otherwise we will have white male being afraid of diversity.
Being afraid of great, strong women, right? Yes. Kasia, from your perspective, you are in the media industry. That's a big social responsibility, really, to give that, not just, to have a diverse business, but also to have the message sent across to a big audience, because it's in many countries it's a really big audience. What is the role of media in creating the good the good message and not having biased way of showing what the world is about?
Well, I think that in a sense, yes, the responsibility is great, but and very big. But in a sense, that puts us also in a position of when I talked about starts with leadership, ends with culture, that we have also a company culture because of that, because of the fact that we report on the world and we report on different issues that is very diverse in a sense, and that really is something that is now a DNA of the organization. Yes, you don't need to put a policy for people to act or to report on things or to see things or to be interested in the topics and do their own shows. It's all about, if you have that, if you are purpose-driven and if you're a value-driven organization and you allow in a media environment like I am, if you allow, you kind of show the journey, but you allow for different voices to be heard, this becomes a very diverse voice. We also have, because we can talk about that it's all just spontaneous. It's not. Yeah, it also takes a job to be done. For instance, on our news, as an example, in our news outlets, when you look a few years back and still in some media, as we know in Poland, you would have pretty much only male experts on the news, yes, and all the discussions, regardless which topic you would tackle. You will have men, in case of Poland, sometimes priests and so on.
Can we say that there was a famous discussion about abortion in Poland, and every single speaker on the panel was male?
So you might we put a lot of effort and emphasis on the fact that we want to showcase women, not just on women cases, and this I'm absolutely in agreement with you. We need to do it together. We need to do it because it's not that men speak on men issues and women speak on women issues only. We are in a society that is diverse, and we introduce a tracker actually in news. So we track who do we invite and who is speaking on what issues. And at the moment we're nearly 50-50. We're 40% women who speak on TV and news, and I must tell that this is this is a number one position in Europe, not just in Poland, in terms of the representation of women in the news. So you can measure that as well, yeah. And now it's kind of the DNA. Everybody thinks like, okay, we just invite diverse group, but to your point, I don't think it's only about men and women. It's much wider.
Definitely, but Henrik, you're the only man, so we need to ask you that question because you're the only one who can answer honestly. Because you've mentioned that that it's a process, making a diverse company. It's a many years long process, and it doesn't happen overnight. It also takes a lot of courage to introduce a succession process. It's always when you promote some groups, other groups are not happy. It's never a conciliatory way. It's never a conciliatory task. So how do you manage that? How do you organize that in order not to alienate all those who kind of lose on those diversity and inclusion policies?
I think it's also when you sit in a large company, I think there are biases. There are biases across cultures. There are biases across how you do your various processes. And if you want to have people raising their heads, you probably need to avoid to make it, and I'll call it the pendulum. You need to be careful of if you push it over here and you try to do it over here. There are also words that gets into that, which then sort of saying, now the air becomes too thick in the room. So it's about finding those biases. So for instance, we did 98% of all people here have been through a bias diversity course, and everyone took it. And we allow people also to have not sarcasm, but also having some exchanges and maybe a smile in between of saying, how does these biases work? And we do make, as I said, and I've never been on a panel where I'm not trying to provoke anyone, so I will also do it here. But as I always say, it's for me, it's easier to work with Henriette than it is to work with my Spanish male chief commercial officer, right? So don't come and tell me about diversity and challenges about that, because I mean this is easier, right? So therefore it's also what is it in here that sets that apart, and to some extent allow me to say it here, because I'm pretty sure there's probably some Spanish in the room now, so saying, Jesus Christ, and now I'm now female Spanish. I mean, this will what happens in Henrik said now. Just easy. You might be much easier than the Spanish male to incorporate then. So therefore, listen, this is how do we go around this, and how can we talk about some of these biases and stereotypes? Because if we don't dare talking about it, then it only becomes a numbers games at the end of the year, and that doesn't work.
Okay, so you need to read the room in the right way.
Yeah, and trust me, I have 2 daughters, 22 and 25, and I have a wife. And therefore I'm used to being voted out of the room, and I haven't started talking about those 2 yet, because this is what I mean by a process. There are things we talked about 5 years ago, and if I bring it up in the way I do it today, we end up only my wife and me having the dinner, right? So these 2, they will be giving somebody a challenge in 10 or 15 years somewhere in an organization. Because bring it up that they might get the job because they're female, fucking hell breaks loose, right? So there's something here that also takes some time, and I'll come back to the association, because if we sack a male, it's because he probably took too many risks, and if we sack a female, it's because it didn't work anyway. We just tried. Huh? Sorry, touching the bias, but that's how life is.
Yeah, it's a tough one to digest. Edeltraud, I wanted to ask you because Roland Berger is a big international company that works with businesses, right? It's a consulting company. So, from your perspective, how do you when you talk to businesses and you try to, well, first of all, do you try to kind of sell the idea of diversity and inclusion being good for business? And if you do, how does it work? How is it taken?
Yeah, first of all, we try to be good role models in all our projects we do with our clients. So, and we work a lot in transformation, but also in innovation. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to work with our clients on culture issues, on leadership topics, and so on. And I want to use the opportunity now to emphasize again our role as company leaders and as innovators, as investors, as people being very engaged in society. What you mentioned in the beginning, this sort of rollback of policies, maybe that's now a wake-up call. And maybe it's especially for us in Europe, maybe we have become a bit too complacent by now. Maybe it's the last wake-up call we get, and it means that we as the private sector, we need to take responsibility. We need to drive change. We need to drive new culture, new ways of leadership, and not so much rely on politicians any longer. I think that's becoming very clear, and that can be, if we wake up to the call, can be a positive change.
Hopefully, so there is a big responsibility on business. Henriette, I wanted to ask you, because all your life really, you worked in really male-dominated industries. Now it's defense. I can imagine a woman in charge of a defense company, a very innovative company, is not something very popular, right? But at the end, it's the bottom line in business that counts, really. Maybe, like, have you ever thought that maybe pushing the diversity and inclusion too hard is not good for business? Maybe there are some industries, but it's better for the bottom line to have some, less diversity, or is it always needed?
I think back to the point, I think is needed in order to have access to talent. But I would also say in my daily life, I don't go into a room and think about my gender. I go into a room and think about the business and the meeting and what we are discussing, whether that is in my own company or on the board. And I think that is how it should be. We should focus on the task at hand and do it. I then do think we also, all of us are in certain positions, have an obligation to be aware of whether there are bias or whether there are any systemic elements, systemic things that may make it more difficult for whether it's a gender or a nationality to reach the potential in leadership positions. So I think we have the obligation to have the difficult discussions as well and challenge each other. And as you can hear, Henrik and I, we are close on the board, when we are discussing investment. And I remember we had a discussion over dinner one day in the sense of a point of, as a woman, how much do you need to speak up and ask for the opportunities, with a position also saying, okay, but if you're already in a minority position and you feel you're a little bit special already, do you want to pay even more attention on you being special if you want to require something? I think it was about an expatriation and if someone had a child and so on. So I think we need to take those discussions so we can see it from both angles and use it to educate each other. And I think that's one of the things that I may also not have done so much earlier in my career, and I think that is necessary. I do think, irrespective of industry, diversity is important, and I think perhaps in male-dominated industries there may be even more overlooked diverse talent because people are not used to looking for it.
Yeah, Definitely. So I wanted to have some concrete solutions by the end of this panel. Kasia, I will ask you about the policies, because you are all very successful CEOs. That's why we're talking to you, because you're influential, you have the power to change things. And what helped you to get to the place where you are, and were there policies, were there people, or was it something else that you would like to propel in your career and give back in that way? Is there one policy or one thing that particularly helped you to get where you are today?
I'm not sure I can point to a policy, to be honest. And it's a little bit what we just heard. It's really, you focus on the business and you focus on the things to be done, and I wouldn't say a policy, but definitely, I think that what's really, really important and what has helped me a lot it's kind of development, and I had specifically one boss who was very focused on development, and that's why I think development is really, really important. And mostly, I would say, self-awareness. We as a leader, I think self-awareness and understanding. I used to run, now I run local, the biggest broadcaster in Poland, but I used to run a very big international business with a lot of offices, like, 20 plus offices across the world, pretty much, and so on. And it was a great, I would say, learning field, because you deal with so many cultures, with so many people, and you still want to develop one culture in a sense. So kind of a set of principles, because it's not one culture, it's a set of principles that gonna unite us as a team. And adapting your leadership style to those situations then really helps you with first and foremost understanding your impact on other people, and how to in a sense manage your impact, manage yourself depending on the situation you are in, and actually to build something that's built based on the same values, but maybe in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different I would say business cultures as well, because that was what I experienced in my life. So it's not really a policy, but it's really about understanding yourself. In my case, I'm talking, it's very subjective, understanding your case and kind of racing with yourself.
You mentioned your daughters, that they are very outspoken. Of course, they have a feminist dad, so it's different. But do you see a generational change in the way people approach diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, in two ways. And I will use, my dad worked 40 years in a factory as a factory worker. So you can almost now expect that when I grew up, I was picking dad up from a factory. And probably the one real thing I got from him was one of his famous saying was, he knew if the CEO lasted. And I said, Dad, what a load of bollocks. And I remember when I got through system, I was the first one that went into to higher education, and I said, Dad, why are you saying that? So he said, do you know what? The CEO that never have time to just say good morning and stop and talk to the factory workers really won't last, because he's not interested in the business, and he's not actually interested in the colleagues that are paying for his bigger car and all the other stuff he's probably getting. And that resonated with me for a long time into life, in saying it's about the interest we care for each other. The downside of that is then when you're formed with that basis, and I do it consequently, and now comes the provocation, and I can run to the door quickly. When I travel to Davos, I do what I always do when I'm on the first flight out on a Monday morning, and I tell the same story to my two daughters. I'm normally on a flight that leaves between 6 and 7 o'clock. And when I go, I never check in luggage, so I take a little longer, because I do all of that, because I never check in luggage. So when I'm through the security check, I know who has passed in the other 3 lines Monday morning. We are not 50-50. And I know it, and I said it to the daughters many times. You might not want to get up early, but don't give me the shit about you're on the 10 o'clock flight and you expect to be back at 4 o'clock, because that's not an operational job. You can tell me that you're coming back Friday evening or Saturday. then you can start impressing me about having an operational job. Because, unfortunately, it is like this. You don't want my job, where you are establishing projects in 35 countries, if you've never sat in operations. You might have had 6 months where there's not been a positive factor hitting you, but that resilience we have to build. That is nothing to do with percentages. That is investing and understanding, and I understand it better than anyone. She's younger than me. She has spent more years in operations. She did all her early flights and her late flights and all her sacrifices. So there is something, there are jobs you don't want if you haven't done that. And let me put that, the last bit for me is, that also means that when you then have the operational experience, then I think we have done one good thing. You meet a lot of our talents, female, males, different diversities on the board sessions we have. So when we have an hour, we appoint, and you can ask if they are the right people, but you are on the nomination and remuneration, at least a couple of your colleagues are. And there you can point and saying, we want this talent, because that gives also a link to a role model. And a role model is so important, not just to get inspired. I saw your videos up here and there was an astronaut and all that shit. No, it's a role model the day where you have to sign the contract where you don't know if that's the job you can do. That's you need your role model. Because that's the day where I have a cup of coffee and saying, don't worry, you are more than qualified. Take the job for Christ's sake, right? And then you also know if it starts raining, I will have the umbrella and I will help you. But I won't do your job.
So it's not about policy, but about empathy, right? Edeltraud, according to you, for you personally, what were the policies? If not policies, then what helped you to become a great leader?
I can relate very much to that, what the two of you just said. It was not policies, definitely not. Of course, it was, especially at the beginning of my career, a lot of hard work, resilience, building up resilience, also against setbacks, so not giving up, having your goal in mind. But more important than anything else was role models. And I'm emphasizing that. I'm not talking about mentors, because a mentor, there's maybe the tendency that the mentor wants to influence you. But a role model, it's your choice, your own choice, what you take and what you don't take. So it's always been people who believed in me, who I could trust, a lot of loyalty. Loyalty is very, very important, I think. And with these role models in mind, it was pretty clear how to go forward, because I could always think, how would this person react in my place? And it was sometimes my father as a role model, but sometimes a female colleague or a female boss. So also diverse role models. And then later in your career, you have to give back and become a role model yourself.
Yeah, so learning by example. Henriette, the same question for you. What helped you, if not the policy? Who was that, or what was that?
So I can relate to a lot of the things being said, and I do think that in corporate world, we also have to realize it's competitive. So I think everyone needs that reflection element. I think that is essential in career progression, is to have that reflection, being aware of both what is real and perceived position you have, and then work with that proactively. I will say, having been in a very male-dominated thing and being one of the few women with an operational background, I have also benefited from positive attention, in the sense that there were not necessarily that many, and there was a big wish to get more women moved ahead. And I think I said, what do you then do to take those opportunities? But I think you also need to make very clear that when you are a minority, and I don't think it matter what type of minority, you are more prone to people making assumptions on your behalf. So I think one of the key things is, policies or not, is really to be very clear on stating what is it that is right for you. And being very clear on that and pursue it and be unapologetic about that, but clearly building the alliances and constant reflection and try to do better every day.
I'm afraid our timer is bright red for a while. So would a good summary of our discussion be that, instead of following policies, just try to be human, try to be empathetic, and try to look for allies and be good to each other, right? And support each other to make diversity and inclusion not a policy, but culture, right? Thank you very much. It's been a great discussion. Thank you so much.